They told us it was just another chapel. They never mentioned the screaming stairs. I'm writing this because I need someone to know what really happened down there. My name is Father Marcelo Varese, and I've served the church for 15 years. Bologna Seminary, class of 2009. Nothing special, just a parish priest who said yes when Cardinal Barbarigo called it an opportunity to serve the Holy See directly. Benedictus Dominus. Sorry, I do that now. Say it when my hands shake. The doctors at Santa Marta gave me pills for the shaking, but they make everything foggy, like trying to remember a dream where people died. 3 months now since I returned. 3 months of Vatican physicians asking gentle questions and prescribing stronger sedatives. 3 months of being told I suffered severe psychological trauma during a classified assignment, and that my hallucinations are a normal response to extreme stress. They have forms for everything, even for priests who've been to hell. 3 months ago, they say it was 3 months, but time moves wrong when you've been where I've been. Cardinal Barbarigo summoned 5 of us to his office in the Apostolic Palace. Not the nice one tourists see. The basement one with no windows and that smell like old incense mixed with something else. Something that makes your teeth ache, like biting aluminum foil with a filling. "Fathers," he said, adjusting his red cap that never sat right on his bald head, "you have been selected for a special diplomatic mission. The Holy Father himself has approved this undertaking." Diplomatic mission. That's what he called it. Like we were going to negotiate with ambassadors instead of, well, you'll see. The other priests were excited. Father Donati kept bouncing in his chair like a schoolboy. He was young, maybe 28, still had that new priest shine. Fresh from the American college, thought Vatican service meant blessing important people and taking photos with cardinals. He brought a leather portfolio everywhere, taking notes like a good student. Father Colombo sat straight as a flagpole, 50-something years of parish work in Tuscany. Gray beard, serious eyes, the kind of priest who could silence a rowdy congregation with one look. He nodded when Barbarigo spoke, like this was exactly what he'd been preparing for his whole career. Father Ricci was the confessor type, quiet, thoughtful, those soft hands that never did manual labor. He specialized in hearing confessions, said he could read souls through their sins. Always carried this little leather notebook where he wrote down, I don't know what, theological observations maybe. That notebook saved my life later, though not his. Father Moretti was the oldest, maybe 65, with thick glasses and that permanent stoop from decades of genuflecting. He'd served in Vatican City for 30 years, knew every corridor and protocol. If anyone should have smelled something wrong, it was him. But he just smiled and blessed himself when Barbarigo mentioned special ecclesiastical architecture. Special ecclesiastical architecture. Another phrase that meant something completely different than what we thought. The mission requires utmost discretion, Barbarigo continued, his fingers drumming against a manila folder he never opened. You will be constructing and consecrating a new chapel in difficult circumstances. The location is sensitive, diplomatically sensitive. Father Colombo asked the obvious question, where exactly, Your Eminence? Barbarigo's smile made my stomach turn, though I didn't understand why at the time. That will be explained during your descent, Father. For now, know that this chapel serves a crucial purpose in the Church's broader theological investigations. Broader theological investigations. Jesus Christ, the euphemisms these people use. He handed us each a thin briefing packet, maybe 3 pages. Mine was mostly redacted black lines, but I remember fragments. Unique environmental challenges, non-standard liturgical adaptations required, mission duration indefinite. The last page was just a liability waiver. Liability waiver. 4 priests. Should have been a red flag, but I was thinking about career advancement, about serving the Vatican directly. 15 years in parish work, dealing with leaky church roofs and altar wine budgets and old women who complained that my Bolognese accent ruined the Latin, and suddenly I'm selected for something important. I still have the briefing packet. They missed it when they cleaned out my personal effects after everything. Want to know what the liability waiver said? Acknowledge exposure to non-standard theological environments may result in spiritual, psychological, or physical complications not covered by standard Vatican insurance policies. Non-standard theological environments. Like hell is a workplace hazard you can file workers' compensation for. Benedictus Dominus. There I go again. You depart tomorrow at 2 a.m., Barbarigo said. Report to Brother Silvano at the San Damaso courtyard service entrance. Bring only essential personal items and your breviary. Everything else will be provided. 2 a.m. departure. Another red flag I ignored. That night I couldn't sleep, kept thinking about my little church in Bologna, Santa Lucia, built in 1347, always too cold in winter and too hot in summer. The congregation knew my name, knew I took my coffee with too much sugar, and gave terrible homilies about financial stewardship. Signora Marchetti always sat in the third pew and corrected my Latin pronunciation under her breath. Dominus vobiscum, Father, not vobiscum. You sound like a tourist. Real life. Normal problems. Normal complaints about normal things. I should have called my bishop, should have asked more questions. But when the Vatican calls, you don't ask questions. You say yes and pack your cassock and tell yourself this is how careers are made in the church. You serve faithfully for 15 years, and then opportunity knocks and you answer because faithful service should mean something, right? Benedictus Dominus. Wrong Latin again, probably. Signora Marchetti would have something to say about that too. Brother Silvano was waiting at 2 a.m. sharp, tall, thin man with engineer's hands and nervous eyes. He kept checking his watch and looking at the sky like he was expecting rain, though it was clear. Led us to a maintenance elevator I'd never seen before, hidden behind a false wall in the basement level. Gentlemen, he said in accented English, Spanish maybe, this elevator serves a very specific purpose. Do not be alarmed by the duration of the journey. And please, no questions during descent. The acoustic properties can be unsettling. The elevator was industrial, nothing like the ornate lifts in the public areas. Gray metal, fluorescent lights that hummed with the wrong frequency. You know how fluorescent lights hum? This was lower, more like a growl. And the control panel had buttons labeled in what looked like, well, not any language I recognized. The symbols seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them, like words trying to rearrange themselves into something readable. Silvano pressed a button marked with a symbol that made my eyes water to look at directly. Like staring at something very bright, but dark instead of light. We descended, and kept descending. Father Donati started joking after the first minute. How deep are we going to China? But his laugh got thinner as we kept dropping. The elevator shaft echoed with sounds that weren't quite mechanical, groaning like metal under impossible stress, but also organic, like something breathing. After 5 minutes, Father Moretti checked his watch. This seems excessive for basement access. Silencio, por favor, Brother Silvano whispered, and his face had gone white. We are transitioning now. The temperature dropped, not gradually, suddenly like stepping into a freezer. Our breath started fogging, and the elevator lights flickered. That's when I first heard it, screaming. Distant, echoing up the shaft from far below. Human voices, but wrong. Like they were screaming words in languages that shouldn't exist. Father Ricci grabbed my arm. Do you hear that? I nodded, but Brother Silvano was shaking his head frantically. No se escucha nada. Nada, nada, nada. Nothing, nothing, nothing. But his hands were pressed against his ears. The screaming got louder, closer, and then I realized we were screaming too. All of us, without meaning to, our mouths open and sounds coming out that we didn't choose to make. Like the elevator shaft was pulling the sound from our lungs. Benedictus Dominus. Benedictus Dominus. Benedictus Dominus. 27 minutes. I know exactly because I kept timing it, checking my watch every 30 seconds like somehow measuring the impossible would make it normal. 27 minutes of descent into something that shouldn't exist, following maintenance schedules and construction permits approved by Vatican bureaucrats who file reports and get promoted and probably list deep infrastructure development on their resumes without ever mentioning where the elevator actually goes. The Vatican has files on everything. Procurement records for the construction equipment. Safety inspections signed by certified engineers. Workers' compensation claims from the excavation crew. Apparently 3 men suffered non-specific psychological disturbances during the dig, but they were covered under standard occupational hazard policies. Hell is just another line item in the Vatican's annual budget report. When we finally stopped, Brother Silvano's hands were bleeding from pressing against his ears so hard. The doors opened onto a platform carved from black rock that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. The air tasted like copper pennies and burnt matches. Welcome, said a voice behind us, and we all jumped like guilty children, to the most ambitious construction project in church history. Monsignor Falcone stepped into the elevator light, Vatican architect, designer of the new St. Peter's Basilica renovations. I'd seen his picture in L'Osservatore Romano just last month, announcing the completion of the new papal apartments. He looked exactly the same as in the photos, except for his eyes. His eyes caught the work lights and reflected them back like an animal's, that green-gold shine you see when car headlights hit a cat in the dark. "Gentlemen, you are now approximately 2,847 meters below Vatican City," he said, consulting blueprints that showed architectural drawings of something my brain couldn't quite process, angles that folded wrong, measurements that didn't add up, and approximately 15 meters inside the traditional boundary of what theologians term the infernal realm. Father Donati's laugh came out too high, too sharp. That's a metaphor, right? Theological hell, not literally. Not metaphorical, Father. Quite literal. Falcone's animal eyes fixed on each of us in turn, and I felt something cold crawl down my spine. His Holiness Pope Francis has personally authorized the construction of a functioning chapel within the realm traditionally understood as hell, for purposes of theological research and diplomatic outreach to previously unreachable populations. The platform extended into a cavern lit by work lights that cast shadows in the wrong directions. Construction equipment, cement mixers, scaffolding, power tools, all bearing Vatican maintenance stickers and work orders. Professional contractors had built this. Union workers with families and pension plans had excavated hell and filed overtime reports. And there, in the center of the cavern, stood our chapel. It looked normal. Almost. Stone construction, traditional Gothic architecture, stained glass windows that showed saints I almost recognized. But the proportions were wrong, too tall, too narrow, like someone had stretched a regular church on a rack. And the bell tower twisted as it rose, spiraling in directions that made my eyes water to follow. "Beautiful work," Father Moretti whispered, and I heard him cross himself. "The architectural details are extraordinary." They were. Every carving perfect, every stone fitted with master craftsmanship. But the crucifixes were mounted upside down, not deliberately, not blasphemously, but like gravity worked differently here, and they'd naturally rotated to hang wrong. And the holy water fonts were steaming, little wisps of vapor rising from blessed water that boiled without heat. "Benedictus Dominus." "Sorry, can't help it now." "Your mission," Falcone continued, unrolling more blueprints, "is to consecrate this chapel according to traditional Catholic rites, establish regular liturgical services, and document any theological anomalies for Vatican review. Think of yourselves as pioneers, exploring new frontiers of faith." Father Colombo found his voice first. "Monsignor, with all respect, this seems irregular. Shouldn't His Holiness have mentioned? His Holiness has many concerns." Falcone's animal eyes reflected the work lights. "This project serves the greater good of the Church. Your discretion is essential. Your cooperation is assumed." He handed us each a brass key, old-fashioned, heavy, with teeth cut in patterns that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. "These provide access to your quarters within the chapel. You'll find everything you need for extended residence. Mass will be celebrated daily at dawn, though dawn and dusk work differently here. Brother Silvano will explain the local variations." Brother Silvano's hands had stopped bleeding, but he kept them pressed against his ears like he was still hearing something we couldn't, or trying not to hear something we could. "One final point." Falcone rolled up his blueprints with the care of a man filing insurance claims on impossible architecture. "Communication with Vatican City is limited during your residency. The atmospheric conditions interfere with standard radio equipment. You are expected to focus entirely on your mission until its completion." Until its completion. But he never said what completion looked like, or how long it might take, or what success meant in a place where holy water boils and crucifixes hang wrong, and the air tastes like hell because it is hell. The elevator doors closed behind Falcone and Brother Silvano with the finality of a coffin lid. We stood on the platform, 5 priests with brass keys to rooms in a chapel built inside hell, listening to our own breathing echo off cavern walls that construction workers had carved according to Vatican building codes. Father Donati was the first to laugh. Not nervous laughter this time, genuine amusement, like someone had told a particularly good joke. "Well," he said, adjusting his leather portfolio, "at least we'll have some interesting stories to tell when we get back." When we get back, Benedictus Dominus. None of us knew then that only one of us would get the chance to tell any stories at all. The holy water screamed when Father Donati touched it. Not metaphorically screamed, actually screamed like a child being hurt, high and sharp and wrong. The sound echoed off the chapel walls and came back distorted, multiplied, until it sounded like a whole congregation of children screaming at once. Benedictus Dominus. There I go again. The pills make it worse, I think. Or maybe hell just broke something in my Latin processing. It was our second day. We'd spent the first night in our quarters, small cells carved directly from the cavern rock, each with a stone bed, a wooden crucifix that faced the wrong direction no matter how many times you turned it, and a single window that looked out onto nothing. Literally nothing. Not darkness, not black space, the absence of anything to see. Like looking at the concept of blindness itself. Father Donati had volunteered to bless the chapel before our first Massachusetts eager, Still had that new priest energy, wanted to do everything right. He'd brought his personal aspergillum from the American college. Sterling silver, blessed by 3 different bishops, his ordination gift from his grandmother. I'll start with the altar, he announced, dipping the aspergillum into the holy water font. Then work outward in the traditional pattern. This should only take. The water touched the silver, and the screaming began. Not just from the aspergillum, from every drop of holy water in the chapel. The fonts, the small vials we'd brought in our personal kits, even the moisture in the air began to shriek like it was being tortured. The sound got inside your skull, made your teeth ache, made your eyes water. Father Donati dropped the aspergillum like it was on fire. The silver hit the stone floor and started to smoke, not from heat but from something else, something that made the metal itself seem to suffer. What did you do? Father Moretti demanded, but his voice was barely audible over the screaming water. Nothing. I was blessing. Donati backed away from the font, his face white, his hands shaking. It's just holy water. It's supposed to bless things. Father Ricci knelt by the dropped aspergillum, careful not to touch it. The silver's melting, he said quietly. But it's not hot. He was right. The sterling silver was liquefying like it was in a furnace, but there was no heat. Just corruption. Like the blessed metal couldn't exist in this place without being destroyed by its own holiness. The screaming continued for 17 minutes. I timed it, because that's what I do now, time impossible things, measure them, try to make them normal through documentation. 17 minutes of holy water expressing agony in voices that sounded almost human. When it finally stopped, Father Colombo crossed himself and said what we were all thinking. We need rules. Benedictus Dominus. Sorry. Can't help it. That's when Father Ricci pulled out his little leather notebook, the one he used for theological observations. His hands were steadier than the rest of ours as he wrote. Rule 1. Holy water screams here. Do not use for blessings. That's not a rule, Father Donati protested, his voice still shaky. That's just what happened. Rules are supposed to tell us what to do, not what we can't do. Same thing, Father Colombo said grimly. Rule tells us not to torture the blessed water. But I was thinking about something else. During those 17 minutes of screaming, I'd heard something underneath the sound, like voices, but not quite. Like the water was trying to tell us something important, and we weren't listening. Our quarters came with a folder of local operational guidelines, written in that same euphemistic Vatican bureaucratese. Most of it was standard chapel maintenance procedures, lighting schedules, cleaning supplies inventory, weekly confession hours. But page 7 had a paragraph that made my stomach turn. Environmental factors may cause standard liturgical implements to exhibit non-standard responses. Personnel should adapt traditional procedures as necessary to maintain operational continuity. Report any significant variations to the supervising architect for inclusion in ongoing construction documentation. Environmental factors. Like hell is just bad weather. Father Moretti found the first real rule by accident that afternoon. He was examining the altar. Beautiful marble work. Carved angels that looked almost right until you realized their wings were torn and their faces showed too much pain. The tabernacle was solid gold, traditional Catholic design, but the lock mechanism was complicated. More complicated than any church lock should be. The key doesn't fit properly, he muttered, trying his brass key in different positions. It's like the lock was designed for a different shape key entirely. That's when Father Ricci looked up from his notebook. What time is it? Just after 3 in the afternoon. Why? Try it again at midnight. We all stared at him. Why midnight? I asked. Father Ricci's soft confessor hands were trembling as he pointed to a line in his notebook. Not one of his observations, but something that was already written there. In handwriting that wasn't his. The locks only open when hell sleeps. I didn't write that, he whispered. It was just there. When I looked at the page just now, it was there. Father Donati grabbed the notebook, flipped through the pages. There's more. Look, whole paragraphs I've never seen before. There were pages of handwriting in different styles, different languages, some in what looked like Latin but spelled wrong, others in scripts I couldn't identify. Like previous priests had used the notebook and left notes for whoever came after. Father Colombo read over Donati's shoulder. Do not attempt Mass during the screaming hours, 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. The consecration reverses. What does that mean, the consecration reverses? None of us knew. But Father Ricci wrote it down anyway. Rule 2. Locks only open when hell sleeps midnight. Rule 3. No Mass between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. Consecration reverses. These aren't rules, Father Donati said, but his voice lacked conviction. These are warnings. From people who were here before us. What people? Father Moretti asked. Monsignor Falcone said this was a new construction project. But we all knew the answer, even if none of us wanted to say it. The Vatican had sent priests here before. Maybe lots of priests. And they'd learned rules the hard way and written them down for the next group. The next group being us. Benedictus Dominus. The shaking's getting worse. I should take another pill, but then I'll forget important details and someone needs to remember exactly what happened. That evening, Father Colombo decided to test Rule 2. At 11:58 p.m., we gathered around the tabernacle while he tried his brass key. Nothing. The lock wouldn't even acknowledge the key's existence. 11:59 p.m., still nothing. Midnight exactly, the key slid in like it was made for the lock. Turned easily, opened with a soft click that sounded almost relieved. Inside the tabernacle was a single item, another notebook. Leather-bound, much older than Father Ricci's, with a Vatican seal pressed into the cover. The first page was signed Father Antonio Grimaldi, Vatican Exorcist, Anno Domini 1962. Father Donati read the first entry aloud. His Holiness Pope John XI has approved the establishment of a permanent ecclesiastical presence in the infernal realm for purposes of theological research and potential diplomatic contact. I am the first priest assigned to this mission. May God forgive us all. The Vatican had been sending priests to hell for over 60 years. Father Ricci wrote, Rule 4. Previous priests left records. Check tabernacle at midnight. Father Grimaldi's notebook was extensive. 40 pages of observations, rules, warnings, and increasingly desperate prayers. The handwriting started neat and ecclesiastical, but by the end it was barely legible, like someone writing in the dark while their hands shook. Some entries were straightforward warnings. The chapel bells ring backwards. Anyone who attempts to ring them in the traditional manner becomes part of the bell tower structure. Father Benedetto learned this on his third day. His body is still visible in the bronze, reaching for the rope. Others were more theological. Confession here works in reverse. The penitent's sins transfer to the confessor, while the confessor's sins are absolved onto the penitent. Father Marchetti heard 3 confessions before we understood. He has not spoken since, though he weeps constantly. The children whose confessions he heard seem different. Lighter. Too light. And some were just desperate. The Vatican radio does not respond to our calls. Brother Silvano claims equipment malfunction, but I suspect we are being ignored deliberately. How many priests has this mission consumed? How many more will follow us? Father Donati stopped reading. His face had gone gray. There were others. Lots of others. Father Moretti took the notebook, flipped through the pages. Look at the dates. Father Grimaldi's entries span 18 months. Then the handwriting changes. Father Rodriguez, 1964. Then Father Castellano, 1967. Then gaps. Gaps? I asked. Years with no entries. Like no one survived long enough to write anything. We spent the next 3 hours copying rules from Father Grimaldi's notebook into Father Ricci's. The essential ones, the survival ones. Rule 5. Chapel bells ring backwards. Do not attempt traditional ringing. Rule 6. Confessions reverse sin transfer. Confessor receives penitent's sins. Rule 7. Vatican radio contact is cut off during mission. We are on our own. But the most chilling entry was on the final page, in handwriting I didn't recognize, someone who came after Father Grimaldi. New priests arrive every few years. Always 5. Always selected for special Vatican mission. Always told they are the first. The Vatican files show this mission beginning in 1962, but the construction workers found foundations dating to 1347. How long has the church been feeding priests to hell? And why? Benedictus Dominus. My hands are shaking too hard to write clearly. Need another pill, but then I'll sleep, and sleeping here means dreams, and dreams here aren't dreams, they're visits. From the priests who came before. Father Ricci closed his notebook. We need to be systematic about this. Document everything. Learn the rules properly before. Before what? Father Donati asked. Before we end up like them. That night, none of us slept. We sat in the chapel common area, a small space with stone benches and a fireplace that burned without wood, flames fed by something we couldn't see, and read Father Grimaldi's notebook cover to cover. By dawn, which came too early and from the wrong direction, like the sun was setting in reverse, we had compiled a working list of survival rules. Rule 1. Holy water screams here. Do not use for blessings. Rule 2. Locks only open when hell sleeps, midnight to 1 a.m. Rule 3. No mass between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. Consecration reverses. Rule 4. Previous priests left records. Check tabernacle at midnight. Rule 5. Chapel bells ring backwards. Do not attempt traditional ringing. Rule 6. Confessions reverse sin transfer. Confessor receives penitent's sins. Rule 7. Vatican radio contact is deliberately cut off. We are abandoned. 7 rules. 7 ways to not die immediately. Father Colombo looked at the list and shook his head. These aren't rules for conducting ministry. These are rules for surviving in a place that wants to kill us. Same thing, Father Ricci said quietly. Same thing now. Benedictus Dominus. But we didn't learn the most important rule until it was too late. The rule that would have saved Father Donati's life, and Father Moretti's, and Father Ricci's sanity. The rule that was written in Father Grimaldi's notebook in letters too faint to see unless you held the page up to the hellfire. Rule 8. Never celebrate Mass in hell without papal blessing. The host becomes a conduit. Father Colombo tried. His body still kneels at the altar, frozen in eternal consecration, becoming more demon than priest with each passing day. We found that rule too late. 3 days too late. After Father Colombo decided he knew better than 60 years of dead priests, and tried to celebrate a proper Catholic Mass in a chapel built inside hell itself. After he knelt at the altar with the consecrated host in his hands, and spoke the words of transubstantiation in a place where transformation works backwards. After his body locked into position, and his eyes rolled back, and something that wasn't Father Colombo anymore smiled at us with too many teeth. His body is still there, still kneeling, still holding the host, still becoming something else bit by bit, day by day. And still smiling. Benedictus Dominus. Benedictus Dominus. Benedictus Dominus. I need another pill. I need to forget his smile. But I can't forget. Someone has to remember the rules. Someone has to warn the next 5 priests the Vatican will send down that screaming elevator. Because they will send more. They always send more. The files go back to 1347. And they're not finished with us yet. I am the only one left who can still think clearly. Father Ricci hasn't spoken since he heard that child's confession 3 days ago. He just sits in the chapel corner, tears streaming down his face, mouth moving in silent prayers that look more like apologies. Whatever sins that 8-year-old confessed, there is now. And whatever Father Ricci's accumulated guilt was, some kid in Bologna is carrying it around, probably wondering why they suddenly feel so heavy. Father Donati is. I don't know what Father Donati is anymore. Benedictus Dominus. Sorry. The pills aren't helping. Nothing helps. It happened yesterday morning, during what passes for dawn down here. The false sun was setting backwards again. That's how you know it's morning in hell, when the light gets dimmer instead of brighter. And Father Donati was reading from Father Grimaldi's notebook. Listen to this, he said, his voice still shaky from watching Father Colombo's transformation. Father Grimaldi writes, the chapel architecture follows inverted sacred geometry. Standard Catholic layout, but mirrored. East becomes west, altar faces the wrong direction, even the stations of the cross run counterclockwise. We all looked around. He was right. Everything was backwards, like someone had built a perfect Catholic chapel and then flipped it through a mirror. The crucifix hung upside down no matter how many times we tried to write it. The holy water fonts were on the left instead of the right. Even the pews faced away from the altar. That's why the consecration went wrong, Father Donati continued. Father Colombo was trying to perform a normal Mass in an inverted sacred space. The blessing reversed because everything here reverses. Father Moretti looked up from where he was keeping vigil near Father Colombo's frozen form. So what do? We can't just not say Massachusetts. We're priests. We adapt. Father Donati stood up, walked to the altar where Father Colombo still knelt in eternal consecration. We learn to work with the inversion instead of against it. That should have been our warning. When someone starts talking about working with hell, you know they're already lost. But we were desperate, tired, scared, and Father Donati had always been the practical one, the problem solver. "What are you thinking?" I asked. "Backwards Mass," he said simply. "If everything here inverts, then maybe we need to invert our approach. Say the liturgy in reverse. Face away from the altar. Turn the blessing inside out." Father Ricci looked up from his corner, alarmed. His first reaction in days that wasn't tears. He shook his head violently, pointed at Father Colombo's frozen form. "Ricci's right," Father Moretti said. "We saw what happened when Colombo tried to consecrate. We can't risk not trying," Father Donati interrupted. "We're priests. Our job is to bring God's presence to impossible places. Maybe this is exactly why the Vatican sent us here. Benedictus Dominus. I should have stopped him. Should have tackled him, tied him up, anything. But I was so tired, and he sounded so reasonable, and part of me, the part that still believed the Vatican sent us here for good reasons, wanted him to be right." Father Donati waited until midnight, when hell sleeps and the locks open. He took the consecrated host from the tabernacle, not the one Father Colombo was still holding, a fresh one from our supplies, and positioned himself behind the altar, facing away from it. "In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti," he began, but backwards. "Sancti Spiritus et Filii et Patris nomine." The words felt wrong in the air. Not just incorrect Latin, wrong in a deeper way, like they were cutting holes in reality. "Donati, stop," Father Moretti whispered. But Father Donati continued, reciting the Mass backwards, holding the host away from the altar instead of toward it, blessing in reverse patterns. The chapel grew colder. The hellfire in the fireplace flickered and changed color, from red to blue to something that wasn't a color at all. And then Father Donati's voice changed. Not his accent or his tone, his voice itself. Like someone else was speaking through his mouth, using his vocal cords but with a different mind behind them. "Corpus meum quat pro vobis traditor," he said in reverse. But it wasn't Father Donati anymore. The words came out in a voice I recognized but couldn't place, deeper than Donati's, older, with an accent from somewhere else entirely. Father Moretti grabbed my arm. "That's Father Rodriguez," he whispered. "From the notebook. The priest from 1964. He was right. Somehow, Father Donati was speaking in Father Rodriguez's voice, saying Father Rodriguez's backwards Mass, channeling a priest who'd been dead for 60 years. "Hic est enim calix sanguinis me," Father Donati/Rodriguez continued, and now there were other voices joining in, layered underneath his own. Father Grimaldi's careful ecclesiastical tone. Father Castellano's Spanish accent. Others I didn't recognize, priests from missions that hadn't left records, dead men saying Mass through a living priest's mouth. The host in Father Donati's hands began to glow. Not with holy light, with something else, something hungry and wrong and ancient. "Stop him," Father Moretti hissed. "We have to stop him." But I couldn't move. None of us could. The backwards Mass was holding us frozen, like Father Colombo at the altar, except we were still conscious, still aware, just paralyzed. Father Donati raised the glowing host above his head, and that's when I saw them. The dead priests. Father Grimaldi stood behind the altar, translucent but clearly visible, his exorcist robes torn and stained. Father Rodriguez knelt in the front pew, his face peaceful for the first time since his death. Father Castellano, Father Benedetto, dozens of others I didn't recognize, all the priests who died in this hell chapel over the past 60 years. They were participating in the Massachusetts, responding to the backwards liturgy in their own dead voices, creating a congregation of the damned. And Father Donati was changing. His face was cycling through different features, Father Rodriguez's aquiline nose, Father Grimaldi's heavy brows, the faces of every priest who'd ever died in this place. Like he was becoming a vessel for all of them, a living reliquary for 60 years of Vatican sacrifice. "Hienem est corpus meum," Father Donati said in a dozen different voices, and consumed the glowing host. The paralysis broke. Father Moretti and I rushed forward, but it was too late. Father Donati smiled at us with Father Grimaldi's smile, spoke to us in Father Rodriguez's voice. "Now I understand. The Vatican didn't send us here to minister. They sent us here to join them." "Join who?" Father Moretti demanded. "The congregation." Father Donati gestured to the dead priests still visible around us. Every priest who's ever served in this chapel. We're not just ministering to hell, we're becoming part of it, building something, a Catholic presence in the infernal realm. Benedictus Dominus. My hands are shaking too hard to write clearly. That's when the Vatican radio crackled to life. Not our radio. We'd tried that for days with no response. This was coming from the walls themselves, like the stone had become a receiver. Cardinal Barbarigo's voice, clear as if he were standing next to us. Ecclesiastical Mission Infernum, this is Vatican Command. Report status. Father Moretti grabbed our handset. Vatican Command, this is Father Moretti. We have casualties. Repeat, we have casualties. Request immediate extraction. Static. Then, negative Mission Infernum. No extraction protocols authorized. Continue with assigned duties. Our assigned duties? Father Moretti's voice cracked. 2 of our priests are dead. 1 is catatonic, and 1 is possessed by previous mission personnel. What duties? More static. Then a different voice, not Cardinal Barbarigo. Older, more authoritative. Father Moretti, this is Archbishop Vitali. Your mission parameters are to establish and maintain Catholic presence in the infernal realm. Casualties are anticipated. Continue operations. What operations? Father Moretti screamed into the radio. You sent us to hell with no instructions, no support, no. You are the operations, Archbishop Vitali said calmly. Every priest who serves in the Hell Chapel becomes part of the permanent ecclesiastical infrastructure. Your deaths sanctify the space. Your souls become the foundation for expanded Catholic influence in the afterlife. The radio went dead. We stared at each other in the silence. Father Ricci had stopped crying and was looking at us with something like understanding in his eyes. Father Donati Grimaldi Rodriguez. Everyone smiled with too many faces at once. Now you see, he said in the voices of the dead. The Vatican has been building a church in hell for 700 years. Not to save souls, to claim territory. To establish Catholic authority in the afterlife itself. Father Moretti backed away from the radio. They're using us. They've always been using us. Not using, Father Donati corrected. Converting. Every priest who dies here becomes part of the Hell Church. Part of the Vatican's eternal congregation. We don't minister to the damned, we become the damned, but with Catholic authority intact. That's when I understood the real horror. Not that the Vatican had built a church in hell. That they'd built a Catholic hell. A version of damnation that still answered to Rome, still followed Vatican hierarchy, still maintained papal authority, even in the pit. And we were the raw materials. Benedictus Dominus. I need another pill. The shaking's getting worse. Father Donati stood up from the altar, his face shifting between the features of every dead priest. Join us willingly, Father Varese. Father Moretti. The transformation is easier if you don't fight it. What about Father Ricci? I asked, looking at our catatonic colleague. Father Ricci has already joined us, in his own way. The sins he absorbed from that child's confession, they're connecting him to every other confessor who ever served here. He's becoming a living repository of hell's guilt. Very useful for Vatican theological research. Father Moretti grabbed my arm. We have to get out of here. How? I asked. The elevator only comes down. There's no way back up. Father Donati / everyone smiled. There is one way. But you won't like it. He pointed to Father Grimaldi's notebook, still open on the stone bench. Page 37. The emergency protocol. I read the page with growing horror. In case of mission compromise, surviving personnel may initiate Exodus protocol. Warning, protocol requires ultimate sacrifice. One priest must remain to maintain Hell Church operations. Others may attempt ascension during 2 a.m. cessation window. Success not guaranteed. Previous attempts, 47. Successful extractions, 3. 3 successful extractions in 60 years. Out of how many attempts? The 2 a.m. cessation, Father Moretti breathed. When hell sleeps, that's when the elevator reverses. For 2 minutes, Father Donati said in Father Grimaldi's voice. Long enough for desperate men to try climbing back to life. But someone has to stay. Someone has to keep the Hell Church operational, or the Vatican will just send more priests. We looked at Father Colombo, still kneeling at the altar in eternal consecration. At Father Ricci, lost in absorbed guilt. At Father Donati, cycling through the faces of the dead. I'll stay, Father Donati said simply. I'm already part of them, already becoming what this place needs. Father Moretti shook his head. We don't leave anyone behind. You're not leaving me behind. You're letting me fulfill my actual mission. Father Donati's voice stabilized into something like his original tone. The Vatican sent us here to become part of hell. I'm just accepting the assignment. Benedictus Dominus. Benedictus Dominus. At 1:58 a.m., Father Moretti and I stood at the elevator shaft. The hellfire in the chapel had dimmed to almost nothing. Father Colombo's frozen form cast weird shadows on the walls. Father Ricci sat in his corner, finally quiet, finally at peace with his absorbed sins. Father Donati stood with them, his face now permanently shifting between the features of every priest who'd ever died in the Hell Chapel. A living memorial to Vatican sacrifice. Tell them, he said in voices I recognized and voices I didn't. Tell them we understand now. Tell them the church in hell is working exactly as designed. The elevator cable shuddered. Something mechanical groaned far above us. Go, Father Donati whispered. 2 minutes. Maybe less. Father Moretti grabbed the cable first. Started climbing. I followed, my soft parish hands already bleeding from the rough metal. Behind us, Father Donati began saying Mass again. Backwards Mass, in the voices of the dead, blessing a congregation of damned priests who would serve the Vatican forever. The cable vibrated under my hands as the elevator machinery reversed itself, fighting against hell's gravity, dragging us back toward the world. I looked down once. Father Donati waved with Father Grimaldi's hand, smiled with Father Rodriguez's face, spoke blessing in Father Castellano's voice. The last thing I heard before we emerged into the Vatican sub-basement was the sound of Hell Chapel bells, ringing backwards, welcoming their newest permanent congregation member. Father Moretti made it out with me. But when we stumbled into Cardinal Barbarigo's office, bleeding and traumatized and babbling about hell churches and backwards masses, the Cardinal just smiled. Excellent, he said, making notes in a file marked Mission Infernum, Phase 7. The integration is proceeding ahead of schedule. That's when I understood. Father Moretti and I weren't escapees. We were the next phase. The Vatican didn't just want priests in hell. They wanted priests who'd been to hell and returned. Living conduits between the Vatican and their hell church. Permanent ambassadors to the damned. Father Moretti realized it too. I saw it in his eyes, the moment he understood we'd never really escaped. How long? He asked Cardinal Barbarigo. How long for what, my son? How long before you send us back? Cardinal Barbarigo consulted his file. 6 months for psychological debriefing and theological integration. Then you'll return to the Hell Chapel as senior mission specialists. Your experience will be invaluable for training the next group of priests. The next group. Always another group. Benedictus Dominus. Benedictus Dominus. Benedictus Dominus. I am the only priest left who remembers what we were before hell changed us. Father Moretti lasted 3 weeks before he started hearing the backwards bells in his dreams. Started speaking in Father Donati's voice during his sleep. Started insisting we needed to return to complete our ministry. Now he's in the Vatican psychiatric ward, sedated and restrained, drawing pictures of chapel layouts and mumbling prayers in languages that don't exist. And I'm alone, writing this testimony that no one will believe, taking pills that don't stop the shaking, waiting for Cardinal Barbarigo to tell me it's time to go back down that screaming elevator. Because I will go back. Not because I want to, but because I have to. The Hell Chapel needs tending. Father Donati and the congregation of the dead need someone to bring them fresh communion wafers, fresh holy water to scream, fresh prayers to invert. And there are new priests being selected. 5 young men, eager and faithful, chosen for a special Vatican mission. They think they're going to minister to the damned. They don't know they're going to become the damned. But with Vatican authority intact. That's the real horror. Not that hell exists, but that the Catholic Church has colonized it, made it theirs. Turned eternal punishment into eternal service to Rome. Benedictus Dominus. I am the only priest left, but not for much longer. The elevator is calling me back. And this time, I don't think I'll be coming up again. 6 months. That's how long Cardinal Barbarigo said the integration period would take. Psychological debriefing, he called it. Theological adjustment. Preparation for senior mission specialist duties. What he didn't say was that it would take 6 months for the Hell Chapel to finish claiming us. Benedictus Dominus. The pills aren't working anymore. Nothing works. I'm writing this in my cell. They call it a retreat room, but the door locks from the outside, in the Vatican psychiatric wing. Same wing where they keep Father Moretti, though he's 3 floors down in the secure ward now. Too dangerous for general population, they said. Too likely to contaminate other patients with infernal ideation. Father Moretti lasted exactly 23 days after our return, before the backwards bells drove him completely mad. I found him in the chapel at 2 a.m., not the Hell Chapel, the regular Vatican chapel where normal priests say normal masses, standing at the altar with his back to the crucifix, mumbling the liturgy in reverse. When I touched his shoulder, he turned around with Father Donati's face. Not similar to Father Donati's face. Actually, Father Donati's face, superimposed over Father Moretti's features like a double-exposed photograph. "The congregation is waiting," he said in Father Donati's voice. "The 2 a.m. cessation window is open. We should return to our duties." I called for help. The Vatican medical staff, they have specialists for this kind of thing, turns out, sedated him with something that smelled like frankincense and tasted like copper when it got in my mouth during the struggle. Dr. Kashani, the Vatican's chief psychiatric theologian, explained it to me afterwards. "Hell Chapel exposure creates permanent neural pathways," he said, showing me brain scans that looked like circuit boards drawn in blood. The infernal architecture becomes embedded in the priest's consciousness. The backwards sacred geometry rewires their theological processing centers. And that's why Moretti thinks he's Father Donati. Father Moretti doesn't think he's Father Donati. Father Moretti is Father Donati, partially. The Hell Chapel creates quantum theological entanglement between all priests who serve there. Past, present, future. They become aspects of a single ecclesiastical entity. Dr. Kashani showed me more files. Photographs of priests from previous missions, all with the same double-exposed facial features. All cycling through the faces of their dead colleagues. All speaking in voices that belong to men who died decades ago. "The Vatican calls it the Congregational Collective," he continued. "A permanent priestly presence in the infernal realm, maintained through continuous soul grafting of new ecclesiastical personnel." Soul grafting. They had a clinical term for it. "How many missions have there been?" I asked. Dr. Kashani consulted a thick file marked Mission Infernum, Historical Overview. Phase 1 began in 1347, during the Avignon Papacy. Pope Clement VI authorized the first Hell Chapel construction after reports of demonic territorial expansion. Phases 2 through 6 involved establishment of permanent infernal infrastructure. You participated in Phase 7, integration and expansion operations. 1300 years. The Vatican had been building a church in hell for 700 years. "What's Phase 8? I asked, though I already knew I didn't want the answer. Phase 8 begins next month. Full infernal diocesan establishment. The Hell Chapel will be elevated to cathedral status, with permanent episcopal appointment." Dr. Kashani smiled. "Congratulations, Father Varese. You've been selected as the first bishop of hell." That's when I tried to run. Tried to escape, tried to contact the Italian authorities, tried to reach anyone outside the Vatican who might listen to a story about Catholic churches built in hell and priests being sacrificed to maintain papal authority in the afterlife. But where do you go when the institution that's trying to sacrifice you owns its own country, maintains its own law enforcement, and has diplomatic immunity from every nation on earth? I made it as far as the Swiss Guard checkpoint before they brought me back. Very gently, very respectfully, but brought me back nonetheless. "Bishop Varese," the guard captain said. "Not Father Varese, Bishop Varese, like the appointment was already official. You're expected in Cardinal Barbarigo's office. Benedictus Dominus." I keep forgetting I'm not just a priest anymore. Cardinal Barbarigo was waiting with the episcopal vestments laid out on his desk. Purple zacchetto, episcopal ring, pectoral cross that looked like it was carved from something that had never seen sunlight. "Your Grace," he said, gesturing to the bishop's regalia. "The Holy Father has approved your appointment. Bishop of the Infernal Diocese, with full ecclesiastical authority over all Catholic operations in hell." I never agreed to this. "Your agreement isn't required. Your ordination as bishop will proceed according to canon law. Your assignment to the Infernal Diocese is an apostolic directive from the Holy Father himself." Cardinal Barbarigo showed me the papal bull, signed and sealed, authorizing the establishment of the Diocese of Hell and my appointment as its first bishop. All very official, all perfectly legal according to Vatican canon law. You can't just make someone a bishop against their will. Of course we can. It's called apostolic succession. The Holy Father's authority extends throughout all of creation, including the infernal realms. Your appointment brings hell under direct papal administration for the first time in history. I looked at the episcopal ring on the cardinal's desk. The stone in the center wasn't a gemstone. It was an eye, human and very much alive, blinking at me with the terrified expression of someone who'd been trapped inside the ring for a very long time. Previous Bishop of Hell? I asked. Bishop Toretti, appointed in 1823, served faithfully for 200 years before retirement. Cardinal Barbarigo picked up the ring, showed me how the eye tracked his movements. He's been incorporated into the episcopal regalia, part of the traditional investiture process. The eye in the ring looked at me pleadingly. Its mouth moved silently, forming words I couldn't hear but understood anyway. Don't let them. Don't let them put you in here. I won't do it. I backed away from the desk. I won't become your Bishop of Hell. You already are, Your Grace. The appointment is effective immediately. Your episcopal consecration will occur tomorrow morning in the Hell Chapel, performed by the Congregational Collective under Cardinal Barbarigo's supervision. That night, they locked me in this retreat room to prepare for the sacred mysteries of episcopal ordination, but really to prevent me from running again. I've been here for 3 days now, writing this testimony, taking pills that don't work, listening to the backwards bells that echo through the Vatican walls every night at 2 a.m. Benedictus Dominus. The shaking is getting worse. This morning, Dr. Kashani brought me a mirror. I thought you should see, he said gently, holding it up to my face. I looked at my reflection and saw Father Donati looking back. Not my face transforming into his, both our faces existing in the same space, double exposed like Father Moretti's had been. The Hell Chapel integration is accelerating, Dr. Kashani explained. Your consciousness is beginning to merge with the Congregational Collective. By the time of your episcopal consecration tomorrow, you'll be fully integrated. I touched my face in the mirror. Father Donati's face touched back. Why? I asked, and Father Donati's voice came out of my mouth along with mine. Why are you doing this to us? Because someone has to minister to the damned, Dr. Kashani said simply. And if the Catholic Church doesn't establish authority in hell, someone else will. Protestant denominations have been attempting their own infernal missions for decades. The Orthodox churches have been conducting exploratory operations since the 1960s. The Vatican cannot allow hell to fall under non-Catholic influence. Religious colonialism. The Vatican was conquering hell the same way Spanish missionaries had conquered the Americas, by establishing churches, installing bishops, and converting the native population to Catholic authority. Except in hell, the native population was made up of the Catholic priests sent to convert them. The damned aren't your enemy, Your Grace, Dr. Kashani continued. The damned are your congregation. Souls who've rejected Protestant error and Orthodox schism, who've chosen Catholic hell over non-Catholic afterlives. They deserve proper episcopal oversight. That's when I understood the final horror. The Vatican hadn't built a church in hell to save souls or fight demons or establish some kind of divine beachhead in the underworld. They'd built it because hell was a Catholic territory that needed proper ecclesiastical administration. All those souls burning in hell, according to Vatican theology, they were still Catholic souls, still under papal authority, still entitled to the sacraments, still subject to canon law, still members of the church even in their damnation. And the Vatican couldn't let them suffer without proper priestly care. Benedictus Dominus, Benedictus Dominus, Benedictus Dominus. Tomorrow morning, they'll take me down that screaming elevator one final time. Cardinal Barbarigo will consecrate me as Bishop of Hell in front of the Congregational Collective, Father Donati and Father Ricci and Father Colombo, and all the other priests who've become permanent residents of the Hell Chapel. I'll put on the episcopal vestments with Bishop Toretti's I trapped in the ring. I'll receive the pastoral staff carved from something that used to be human. I'll accept full ecclesiastical authority over every Catholic soul burning in hell. And then I'll spend eternity administering the sacraments to the damned, blessing their eternal suffering, providing proper priestly oversight for their never-ending punishment. Because that's what the Catholic Church does. It provides pastoral care to its members, no matter where they end up. Even in hell, especially in hell, the backwards bells are ringing again. 2 a.m. cessation. The elevator window is open, but I'm not trying to escape this time, because I finally understand what Father Donati understood, what the Congregational Collective understands, what every priest who's ever served in the Hell Chapel eventually realizes. We're not victims of some Vatican conspiracy. We're ministers fulfilling our ultimate pastoral duty. The damned need shepherds. Hell needs bishops. The Catholic Church takes care of its own, even in the afterlife. I am the only priest left who remembers what we were before hell claimed us. But tomorrow, I'll be Bishop Varese, first bishop of hell, providing proper ecclesiastical oversight to the Vatican's eternal congregation. And in 6 months, they'll send new priests down that elevator. Young men eager to serve, chosen for a special Vatican mission. I'll welcome them to their new parish. I'll teach them the backwards liturgy, the inverted sacraments, the proper way to bless eternal suffering. I'll help them understand that hell isn't punishment for the Church. Hell is just another diocese that needs proper administration. Benedictus Dominus. The elevator is calling. Bishop Varese of the Infernal Diocese is ready to take up his pastoral duties. Final note, written in a different hand. Found among the papers of Father Marcello Varese, following his disappearance from Vatican psychiatric facilities. Father Varese was officially reported as missing, presumed deceased, after a comprehensive search of Vatican City failed to locate him. His room showed no signs of forced entry or struggle. The above document has been classified under pontifical secret and sealed in the Vatican secret archives. Any attempt to reproduce or distribute this material constitutes a violation of canon law and Vatican City criminal statutes. Cardinal Alessandro Barbarigo, Prefect, Sacred Congregation for the Evangelization of Infernal Territories. Anno Domini 2024. P.S. The next group of seminarians has been selected for advanced theological studies. 5 young men, eager and faithful, chosen for specialized Vatican service. Applications for the Infernal Ministry program are now being accepted for the spring semester. Inquire within.